So you're playing Axis and Allies and you got stuck on the rules for sea combat. Good news, we're here to help. Welcome to Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. This video is part one of a 5-part series breaking down each of the elements of sea combat for Axis and Allies. In part one, we'll be diving into explanations and examples for subs and destroyers. Part two of the series, we'll take a look at aircraft carriers. Part three, all about transports. Part 4, getting into the big boys, cruisers and battleships. And finally, in Part 5, we'll bring it all together with amphibious assaults. Each video will have full explanations of the rules and a number of very detailed examples. One quick thing, if you're brand new to Axis and Allies, this video is not for you. You need to head over to our complete how to play video linked in the card above. It'll take you through the game from top to bottom, or you can jump around using the chapter guide in the description. This video series is for folks that are looking for rules clarifications and examples specifically about sea combat. Overall, we'll be focusing on 1942 2nd edition, but thankfully, the rules for sea combat haven't changed that much since the original came out back in 1984. So about 94.6% of the series is going to transfer to other versions of the game. Before we get started, if you like anything having to do with board games, and well, you clicked on this video, so I'm guessing the answer to that question is yes, please support content like this by subscribing to the channel. Thanks. All right, let's make it hot. Let's start with a unit that gives the players the most trouble, submarines. First, let's take a look at the basic stats for this unit. Subs cost 6 IPCs, score a hit while attacking on a roll of a 1 or a 2, but on defense, only hit on a 1. And that isn't bad for the price, but it's the subs' abilities that really make it such an important piece of the game. In Step 2 of General Combat, attacking and defending subs must make a choice. Starting with the attackers, they can choose to perform a surprise attack, or they can submerge. Let's look at the surprise attack. This is basically a first strike ability. Submarines fire in Step 2 of General Combat rather than in Step 3 like the other attacking units. Any sea units it destroys are immediately sunk and removed from the game. That destroyed unit will not get to fire. But more on this when we get into the examples. Or the submarines can choose to submerge. This means that before any combat dice are rolled, the submarines can choose to withdraw from the battle. They stay in the same sea zone, but are no longer part of combat. Subs have 2 other abilities. Subs cannot be hit by air units, and they may treat hostile sea zones as friendly. Subs also have 2 major drawbacks. First, they can't hit air units, and they can't block enemy movements. Let's check out a few examples to demonstrate the power of these abilities. First, let's look at an example of sea combat in the North Atlantic. This example will demonstrate the real power of the surprise attack. Well, it looks like the Americans might be in for a bad day. Let's see how this plays out. The Germans make a combat move with all 3 subs moving into Sea Zone 10. Let's assume this is the only battle for Germany and head over to the battle board. Real quick, cruisers attack and defend at a 3, they cost 12 IPCs to build, and they do have a special ability, but it's not particularly relevant here. We're going to cover all that in Part 4. Step 2. This is where the subs really shine. They get to use their surprise attack. They'll attack at a 2, and any ships destroyed will not get to fire back. Okay, let's see what happens. 1 hit. Not bad. The Americans remove one of the cruisers, so the other cruiser gets to shoot back. Because there are only subs in this attack, we'll skip Step 3. Cruisers need a 3 or less to hit. A hit, the Germans remove a sub. Because the subs sank any hits in Step 2, we skip Step 5. Step 6, the Germans choose to continue or retreat. They'll continue the fight, which takes us back to Step 2. The Germans fire with their 2 subs and score a hit. And that is the end of combat. The cruiser sinks to the bottom of the sea without ever getting to fire back. We jump to Step 7 and place the subs back on the map. Just a quick note, remember, no one ever controls a sea zone. It's either friendly or hostile. Next, what happens when you have a sub on the defense? Here we have a lone Japanese submarine minding its own business off the coast of the Philippines. The British cruiser decides to take a swipe at it. The cruiser moves into the sea zone and declares an attack. Assuming that this is the only thing going on, they move into general combat. Step 1, place the units on the battle board. Step 2, the sub must choose to perform a surprise attack or submerge. In this case, it'll stay and fight. Still in Step 2, the defending sub fires, a miss. Now to Step 3, the cruiser fires needing 3 or less, a miss. Defenders fire, everything they can fire has. Step 6, press the attack or retreat, the British will stay and fight. This begins a new round of combat. At the beginning of each round, players need to see what's changed and make sure that the options are accurate for both the attackers and the defense. Again, the subs will stay and fight. They're looking for a roll of a 1 and a hit. The British cruiser is destroyed and removed from play. All attackers are destroyed. That's the end of combat. The sub goes back to its patrol. The sub could also have submerged. Let's see what that would look like. Again, the British cruiser moves to attack the lone sub. We move to general combat. Step 1, we head over to the battle board. Step 2, surprise attack or submerge. This time, the Japanese sub will choose to submerge and not engage in battle. The sub is returned to the map, and this ends the combat. In this example, the cruiser's attack is technically successful, and it ends its turn in the same sea zone with that Japanese sub. Let's look at that example one more time, but this time, let's give the Japanese some help. A Japanese cruiser has joined the sub on its patrol. The British attack. Let's go to the battle board. The sub still gets all the same options in step 2. It will choose to submerge. It leaves the battle board and heads back to the map. The rest of the combat between the cruisers would play out as normal, but regardless of the outcome of that battle, the sub will still be in Sea Zone 48 at the end of the turn. Next up, the subs can't be hit by air units ability. This is a simple rule that a lot of folks seem to overthink. Here's the most common use of this ability. The German subs are hanging out in Sea Zone 9 and the UK has a number of air units ready to strike, but they can't because the subs can't be targeted by air units. This gets a little trickier when you throw other units into the mix. This time, the German sub has some company. The German cruiser's presence means the British air units can attack, but they still won't be able to hit the sub. However, when the British cruiser enters the battle, now the German sub has to engage. So we've got a fighter and a cruiser from the UK attacking a sub and a cruiser from Germany. To the battle board. Step 2, the sub has to make its choice, surprise attack or submerge. It will stay and fight. It rolls looking for a 1 and a miss. Step 3, attackers fire. The British cruiser fires, also a miss. The fighter shoots, a hit. The hit from the air units can't be assigned to the sub, so the defender must take the hit on the cruiser. Step 4, defenders fire back. The sub's already fired. The cruiser fires, a hit. The British remove the cruiser from play. Step 5, we remove the German cruiser. This ends the combat. The fighter can't hit the sub, and the sub can't hit the fighter. They both return to the map, and the fighter waits for the non-combat move phase. Notice that that example showed the double-edged sword that this ability can be. Normally, a player would typically take the hits on the less expensive units, but because the subs can't take hits from air units, it often puts the players in a bad spot. Just something to keep in mind. One last thing to cover about submarines. Subs can treat hostile sea zones as friendly. Here's a quick example of what that might look like. Here we have a pack of Japanese subs looking for a fight. In Sea Zone 57, we have a stack of American cruisers, but in 56, we've got a shiny new carrier that would make an easy target. Because the subs can treat hostile sea zones as friendly, they can slide right past the cruisers and attack that lone carrier. However, the reverse is also true. Just as enemy ships can't stop subs from moving through, subs can't block enemy movement either. So if we look back at the Pacific, a pile of Japanese subs in Sea Zone 57 can't stop the American cruisers from sailing by and attacking the ships in 59. And all of that is true, unless there's a destroyer present. I'm sorry, what? Destroyers are submarine hunters. They cost 8 IPCs, attack and defend at a 2, but more importantly, they cancel most of the submarine's abilities. If an enemy destroyer is present at the beginning of a round of combat, the sub doesn't get a surprise attack, they can no longer submerge, and they fire in step 3 like everybody else. They can be hit by planes, plus the enemy destroyer blocks submarines from passing through hostile sea zones undetected. Here's an example that should illustrate how all of those abilities work together. In this battle, we've got a lot going on. This should be interesting. Both sides have subs, but both sides also have destroyers, so no special abilities. We have 2 different kinds of units with an attack value of 2. Normally, that wouldn't be a big deal. We could roll them together. But the attacker has 2 subs that can only hit ships. So let's roll for them first. 1 hit. Now, the destroyer. A miss. Now, the fighter is attacking with a 3. 1 hit. Now, the bomber and the battleship at a 4. 1 more hit. That's a total of 3 hits, 1 of which is from a sub. The defenders take 1 hit on the battleship, 1 on the sub, and 1 on the destroyer. You turn the battleship on its side to indicate that it's taken its first of 2 hits. The subs fire back at a 1, a hit. Remember, this hit will have to be taken on a ship. The destroyer and the carrier will need a 2, 1 hit. Now the fighters and the battleship at a 4, 2 hits. For a total of 4 hits, but the sub hit has to be taken on a ship. The attackers assign the sub hit to the battleship, a hit to the sub, a hit to the destroyer, and 1 more to the fighter. Casualties back to the box. The Americans like how this is going so far. They press the attack. Next round of combat. This time, we have an attacking sub but no defending destroyer. The American subs get a chance to use that sneak attack. 1 hit. Ouch. That's going to be costly. The Japanese have to assign that hit to a ship, and the transport has to be chosen last. So, the Japanese choose the carrier and remove it from play. The defending fighters stick around, but the carrier is no more. Now we have the bomber and the battleship at a 4, 1 hit. The defender selects a fighter for the hit. The defenders have the battleship and 2 fighters looking for a 4. But these will need to be rolled separately as well, because the Japanese no longer have a destroyer. The air unit can't hit the subs. They roll for the fighters, 1 hit, and then the battleship, a 2nd hit. 2 hits total, 1 can't be assigned to a sub. The attackers take a hit from the battleship on the sub, and take the fighter hit on the bomber. We clear the battlefield. Seems like the tables have turned. The Japanese have a wounded battleship and a fighter remaining, and the Americans only have a smoking battleship. The Americans decide to retreat. Like land units, all retreating units must go back to the same adjacent land territory, and that territory must be where at least one of those units came from. Air units are excluded from this rule and move during the normal non-combat. One last note about subs and destroyers. The ability of the destroyer to cancel the sub's supercool abilities doesn't transfer to your buddies. So, if your destroyer is in the same sea zone as an enemy submarine, and your buddy comes in and tries to attack that submarine, they have to bring a destroyer of their own to cancel the sub's abilities. Here's how this rule might look on the board. Let's say the Americans ended their turn with a destroyer in Sea Zone 15, and the Germans built a sub on their turn in the same sea zone. If the British or the Russians choose to attack the German sub, they'll need to bring a destroyer of their own to the party. Otherwise, the German sub will keep all of its cool guy abilities. The American destroyer is just a bystander in the fight and can't help in the combat, including offering its onboard tech. And there you have it, everything you need to know about submarines and destroyers for Axis and Allies. Get ready for part 2 of our series. Next time, we'll be taking a detailed look at aircraft carriers. If you found this video helpful, please take a second, give us a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to the channel. My name is Gary Blevins, this is Board Game Nation. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.